What's up world? It's Willy What If, here with the first video on our new channel. Our new favorite place for original stories, creative theories, and exciting fanfics of your favorite franchises. If you enjoy what you see, then feel free to subscribe. Let me know if you like the story or have any suggestions on what you want to hear. There are no limits on what series or franchise I'll work with, so be creative, and get excited. Part 1. Everything tasted like piss. The walls flexed and waved under his gaze and his legs were set to wobble. The bottle was in his right hand, more than half empty by the last 15th minute. His cheap, gray suit reeked of the stuff and his ugly brown work shoes were splattered at the tips with muck. Green hair came out in wild, unmanned knots that only grew worse from the previous month when he stopped washing his hair. It seemed so pointless when he was just there behind a desk for hours on end daily. Again his lips kissed the rim of the glass, feeling the bitter burning liquor numb his mind. He was 24 now. His dreams were long dead and he had traded the corpse in for a suit and tie. He was quirkless, the second bottom of the pyramid that was just above the criminally insane. All his life he kept his head down, always doing what others told him because it was easier than pushing against everything society expected of him. Sure, he'd survived the so-called meta-liberation war way back when, but it just meant he cowered in a bunker with his mother and thousands of other horrified civilians. And the sick thing is that nothing changed after the smoke cleared. Everything just went back to the normal status quo. He was still just a regular man leading a mediocre existence. He had survived one of the worst conflicts in recent memory and gained nothing from it. He was even still a virgin, which just added on top of the pain. Yet the one thing that stung above all else was seeing him on the screens, lording his superiority over everyone despite the fact the fucker almost bullied him into suicide more than once. Dynamite the hero, Dynamite the savior of society, Dynamite the golden man. All he did was kill the nut job behind the revolution and everyone kissed his ass. Where's the justice in that? Where was his chance at the spotlight? Where could he actually do some good for somebody before he dies? He just wanted to help, to be useful in a way that wouldn't destroy his soul. But no, he was genetically inferior. A living relic in the age of wonder that didn't belong. In his drunken stupor, words fly back to which he never could forget no matter how hard he tried. They came out in a pathetic whisper that tickled the ear. It's not bad to dream, but you have to be realistic. And quote. All Might told him that. The man he idolized, the one who he tried to use to replace his deadbeat of a father who ran out on him and his mom before he could string two words together, told him his dreams were stupid. The bottle shattered on the gray concrete walls surrounding the alley, spraying green glass everywhere. Fuck was all he could say with his emotions now rubbed raw by both stress and the drink. He was doomed from the start and forced to watch others who didn't give one shit about people like him or those who can't save themselves unless there's a stupid villain to fight. No one reaches out. No one asks how you are. No one cares unless you got the right stuff, and he most certainly did not. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the folded paper, undoing it and reading it over one last time. Damn, was he really going to do it this time? Why not? Everything else sucks, so why not just give one big middle finger to the world and say fuck you before you suffer anymore? Nobody would be hurt, except him, and nobody would care except his mom. But with his life insurance she'll be set for life once it's done. The bridge was only a few blocks away and even now he could hear the ocean. Just one step and everything is finished. No more pain, no more anger, no more sadness. Just nothing. He hoped. So he walked, passing bums and other night owls who looked to be far happier than him until the buildings melted away into massive open sky flanked by thick steel cables holding up the monstrosity, while a trickle of traffic that barely gave enough light to see on the pedestrian section. Dying lamps did the rest to boost the glow of a crescent moon which reflected off the still surface of the waves below. Horns honked and the smell of exhaust fumes ripped into his nose, making the movement even less pleasant. But really, what did he care about at this point? He passed further along the path than he intended, likely to hold off on the deed. Now at the middle section of the bridge, he turned towards the ocean, taking in the eerie darkness of the water mixing with the silver light above. He couldn't help, even as intoxicated as he was, that it was beautiful. His hands touched the guardrail, its rusted paint unpleasant in the least, but still he held on, taking a deep breath and preparing himself. Then came a smell that was even fouler than the car exhaust thrown in his face. It was the signature stink of cigarettes, menthol cigarettes, that afflicted him so much that he turned his head to the left to see where it was coming from. Standing 10 feet away was a girl leaning over the railing, blonde with her hair cut short enough to see her ears in a duffel coat littered with faded stains of brown blending in with the leather. Her skin was ghostly pale in the moonlight which contrasted with the glow of the cigarette in her mouth. He hadn't noticed her on the way here, likely too drunk or stupid to care. Feline eyes peered at him from the corner of her head, passively acknowledging his existence before turning to study the man. She was beautiful, or rather she may have been beautiful once. No wrinkles dotted her face, yet deep purple bags rested under her eyes, and in them was the look of someone forcibly aged past their years, of some who had seen or done too much. Perhaps she could be his age, but it was hard to tell from the way she carried herself. Even from the outset of a total stranger, she looked tired, like someone who should have collapsed by now, but remained out of sheer sturdiness and will. Had she been less fit, he'd think her ancient from the gaunt features surrounding her. He said nothing to the woman and she likewise said nothing, just scanning the other for some hidden clue or story. The man grunted in mild displeasure. This was supposed to be his spot. It was another thing the universe did to kick him in the teeth. May as well move further down the line. No sense in ruining somebody else's life with his bullshit. He let go of the handguard and attempted to move past the woman, but as he got 3 feet away something stopped him. "You alright?" Inquat. Her voice was unusually soft for a smoker, with a high tone that belonged to someone much younger. He paused, turning around to examine the stranger. "Not really, how about you?" Inquat. She took a light puff off her vice, refocusing on the stretch of ocean in front of them. "Me? Pretty far from okay, but close to good enough." Inquat. He eyed her a bit more, taking in how her body blended well with the backdrop of night. "Couldn't hurt to ask, could it? What are you doing out here?" Inquat. The girl took another drag on the tobacco, still indifferent and tired as a person 4 times her age. "Paying respects to an old friend. He died 8 years ago today, so I'm out here to think." "What about you?" Inquat. He stepped back a bit at that, not sure how to respond. Then he figured, what the hell? "I'm here to jump off this bridge." Inquat. She stopped mid-puff, exhaling a smoke that wafted away into the sky as she turned to look at him again. "Mind telling me why?" Inquat. The man shrugged at the question, finally not giving 2 shits about anything. "Because I'm sick of life's bullshit. 25 years on this earth and not a single one was good. I never got the things I wanted and everything is horrible because people see me as less than dirt because I'm a setback. A man without a quirk. So I've decided to fuck off before I start taking it out on others. Ain't like anybody is gonna care anyway." Inquat. She raised an eyebrow at him, stuffing her cigarette in her mouth as she crossed her arms across her chest. "Really? 20-something years on Earth and you can't say you've never had one good time? Nothing that makes you glad to be alive?" Inquat. He chuckled at her cynically. "None of that really fucking matter. Yeah, I've enjoyed a day out at the movies or read a good book or went for a good jog in the park. But none of that was me. That was all basic, boring stuff that you can barely do when you got to work back to back. The most I've done is live vicariously through fiction, and every time I try to reach out to someone I get shot down because they don't want to be seen with someone like me." Inquat. There was an undertone of anger in her voice that caught him off guard when she started to approach him, her black shoes tapping against the pavement. "So that's it? You're going to throw your life away just because of some random assholes when you haven't had any fun at all?" Inquat. Soon there came a similar indignation in his own voice that matched hers almost to a T. "It's more than that. My entire life is fucked. I can't be a hero, I can't get a better paying job, and nobody acknowledges me, all because I'm quirkless. I'm a goddamn freak!" Inquat. The cigarette swished in her mouth, going from left to right as a narrowing glare was thrown his way. "Firstly, check your tone. Secondly, if your only issue is that you don't have some special ability, then you're doing better compared to most people because quirks aren't always beneficial. Believe me when I say this, they can completely fuck up your head if you don't know how to manage it. Thirdly, if a person like me can have a somewhat fulfilling life after all the stuff I've done, then there's definitely hope for you, so don't go throwing everything away just because you want to bitch out at the world." Inquat. He stared contemptuously at the woman, finding himself being egged on by her own anger. "Oh, what the hell would you know about anything? What the fuck could you do that was so bad?" Inquat. She reached into the pocket of her duffel coat and in a flash there came the touch of something sharp on his neck, her eyes still alight in cold anger. "I used to run with a gang in my teens. I was a certified villain by the time I was 17 and I stabbed people for sport, most of which were heroes. I got caught and taken to Tartarus with the worst of the worst. I had nothing, no family, no money, and no friends that were able to help me because they were all dead." Inquat. The edge dug a little deeper into his neck, drawing a fine line of blood. "The only reason I didn't get life was because of my age and my quirk. If it wasn't for the fact that I studied for my own appeal and begged someone I used to try to kill for help, I never would have seen the sun again. When I got out I honestly thought about doing what you're thinking, but I owed it to myself and everyone I hurt and everyone I love to keep on living because life is the most precious thing in the world and there were thousands of people who would have killed to be where I was. So don't start thinking your little bullshit is the end of everything, because it's not, and you can keep going and you can make something of yourself even if the entire world is against you if you just try." Inquat. Slowly he raised his hands up in surrender, not expecting any of this. "Okay, you have a point. Granted I didn't know any of that, but how about you put the knife away and we get to talking? Because wouldn't stabbing me in the neck be counterproductive to what you just said?" Inquat. The woman continued to glare at him, taking the knife off his throat and slipping it in her pocket. Rubbing the cut, the man sighed in relief. Maybe he didn't want to die after all. "So how about we get introduced before anything goes further? I'm Izuku Midoriya and you would be?" Inquat. Daggers were eyed at his outstretched hand as was his smile. A bead of sweat trailed down his back as his body reacted to the danger, hoping to defuse the situation before things got out of hand. This is the part where most people would run away. And quat. He shrugged, hand still outstretched. Curiosity battled evenly with fear while he continued to talk. I've said living isn't one of my top priorities right now. Besides, you're actually interesting, unlike most of the people I meet. And quat. She rolled her eyes in a reluctant softening of her gaze. She clasped his hand tightly, rough calluses scratching uncomfortably on his own palm. Himiko Ito. Now since I've done something you asked, mind doing something for me? And quat. He grinned a bit as their hands parted, still thumbing the nick on his neck. It was a rush that was for certain, and who knows, maybe things will get better if he sticks around. Depends on what it is. And quat. The former villainess inhaled the last of her vice, throwing it on the ground and snuffing it out with the tip of her heel. Just wait until you sober up before you think about ending it all, and try to find at least one goal for yourself before you die. And quat. Again, he smiled at the woman, unsure of why he was so enthused about being around a person who could have killed him. Interesting proposition. I can go along with that, but I have one question. And quat. She raised an eyebrow at him with her hands resting in her pockets, which caused a small flinch to occur while he took a step back. Which is ? And quat. He was honestly starting to feel a little better the more he spoke. You were set to die anyway, may as well get some use out of it. Would you mind if I slept it off at your place ? And quat. Her glare returned with a vengeance as she shifted her hands along her pockets. Now this was the face of someone who had seen more than they should have, and it only intrigued him more when she spoke with her voice soft and calming like a lullaby. I'm not a whore. I don't sleep with anyone unless I truly love them and they love me back, so don't think I'm some airhead you can use. Nobody popped my cherry yet, and I intend to keep it that way for now. And quat. He raised his hands once again, feeling a tad more jovial than he used to. He felt the need to ask himself again, why not? Life was boring and meaningless, so may as well try to do something different. Easy there. I'm just asking to crash on your couch since my apartment is on the other side of the city. That's all right with you? And quat. Himiko studied his face once more, remaining silent and almost unnerving as she did. It was akin to staring at a tiger sizing up another predator to see if there was any danger to be had. You have another motive for doing this. What is it? And quat. He laughed to try to regain some of his ease about the situation. If the knife wasn't enough to point it out, this girl wasn't exactly the picture of mental health. As I've said, you are a very interesting woman, and I've already stated that my social circle is practically non-existent. Is it so bad I want to get to know you a little more? It's not every day you come across a badass ex-assassin who tries to talk sense into you. And quat. Again she gauged him, watching every little twitch of his skin for deception. Then in an instant her expression relaxed, making her seem relieved that he appeared to be telling the truth. Fine, but if you try anything I'll get you. And quat. Izuku smirked at her somewhere between fear and challenge. He actually got something he wanted tonight, and that was a very big first for him. I bet you're a riot at parties with phrases like that. And quat. She rolled her eyes at him, leading him somewhere to the west of the bridge while he followed after the blonde, the thoughts about his plan burning away bit by bit when he found something new to put his energy towards. He needed an adventure, and in his darkest hour one presented itself to him. His back popped as old springs whined at his rise from the dark red fabric of the sofa. There was a slight throbbing in his head which he knew were the tellings of a hangover, if only a lesser one, and his body was covered by a thin red blanket that was cast off in his attempt to sit up. Where was he? This wasn't his apartment or his mother's. The walls surrounding him that made up the room itself were not quite dilapidated, but close enough to suggest a far cheaper place than any of them would want. Sections of drywall rotted away from age, exposing the boards underneath the white paint that in of itself was ancient. Lights were absent from the place, yet he guessed that was due more to it being early afternoon? He hoped, with the sun providing the needed illumination. Overhead a few tiny slots for light bulbs dotted the ceiling, but again were turned off. To his direct left was a balcony which had purple curtains pulled to either side to allow the sun in. Along the walls were pictures of people he didn't recognize. One in a black and gray mask, one that looked like a magician with a maybe African type mask, one that looked horrifically burned, and one of a giant mutant lizard. There might have been more, yet he didn't really give enough of a care to keep looking with his head aching as it was. Taking a hand into his pocket he pulled out his phone. Well, it was Saturday, so at least he had the day off. That was one question answered, but where exactly was he? The sound of sizzling oil coming from a square cutout further in the living room clarified some of it. He recalled a small amount of what happened, the parts with the bar, the note and the walk. After that, he wasn't so sure. He met a girl? At the bridge when he, now it was coming back piece by piece. He rubbed the side of his neck, feeling the abrasive slit of a scab already formed in his slumber. The drink had certainly erased most of his inhibitions, but not to the point of erasing last night. His hands rested on his knees as the idea of what to do next tried to come around. Izuku wasn't scared so much as disappointed with himself. All that anger, and for what? Copper suddenly lingered in the air, seeking out from the kitchen to the rest of the apartment and cutting off his inner monologue. Standing up from his makeshift bed, the gray carpet crinkled audibly under his feet as he approached the kitchenette. Poking his head around the corner, he was greeted by two yellow feline eyes which regarded him indifferently while a pan of eggs cooked on the gas stove. It was the same woman he had met last night, Himiko, if he remembered correctly. She was dressed in a plain white dress and sports shorts, her short blonde hair was unkempt. The soft tone of her voice carried over to him, still catching him off guard with how worn out she appeared. "You sleep all right?" ? Izuku blinked at her, not quite sure what to say in his filthy work clothes which still had the slight smell of booze and body odor about him. Habitually his fingers tapped the corner to vent out some of the emotion. "Yeah. Hey, so just to ask, did I really try to jump off a bridge or did I dream that part ? She flipped one of the eggs, watching it fry into a nice brown. "Not really. You were going to, but then you and I got to talking, which became an argument, and then you asked to spend the night here. All that happened next was you drunkenly wishing me good night and falling back first into my sofa the second you got in the door. He kept tapping the corner, suddenly more embarrassed than he likely should have been. "Oh, sorry about that. She shrugged, slipping the eggs onto a plate and starting to cook some strips of bacon afterwards. "No skin off my nose. If I had an issue with it, I'd just thrown you out the door. He eyed the bacon hungrily as both the headache and his stomach demanded something greasy to ease the suffering. "You, mind if I have some of that ? She drained some of the grease out into a plastic cup, setting the strips which had turned a wonderful shade of brown. "You gonna pay me for it? I ain't exactly running a charity over here. Izuku fumbled for his wallet, finding to his annoyance only his debit card inside. "Sorry, I just have plastic. Maybe I can treat you to lunch ? How about we deal with another currency? I give you food and you give me information. He raised an eyebrow at the girl who began setting out a second plate. "What would you possibly want to know that I could tell you ? The plate was forced into his hands as she turned the corner and gestured to the cheap wooden table a few feet away. "Tell me what the hell made you want to jump off that bridge, and be specific about it. Not just this whole my life sucks boo-hoo shit or oh I'm quirkless woe is me excuse. There has to be a real reason you wanted to take your own life that goes deeper and I want to know. Taking a seat across from the woman, he relaxed a small bit as he watched her retreat to the fridge, mentally shrugging as he did so. "Aside from the alcohol? Like I vaguely recall saying, my life sucks. It has since I was 5. My dad ran off on my mom and me, ended up dying in a bar fight when I was 16 in New York while we barely had enough to survive. Nobody thought I'd amount to anything. Hell, All Might himself told me my dreams were unrealistic after he saved me from a villain. So far it's just been this soul-crushing grind while others get the high life. They get to help while I'm cast aside so much that nobody even wants my help. A tall thermos was put to the side as Himiko took out a massive jug of red liquid which had the smell of iron or copper and poured it in a pan over the stovetop. "So that's it? You just want to quit life because your daddy left you and some old guy who nobody heard shit about for years told you you can't punch some idiots in the face since you're just a normal dude? That's a stupid fucking reason if I'm being honest. A thermal needle was in her hands, sticking into the pan until it read 37 degrees Celsius. From a lower drawer came a funnel which let her pour whatever it was inside the thermos. "No, if I'm seeing anything right now, you either don't understand your trauma or you're not talking about it. Let me guess, somebody beat you until you stopped dreaming. Am I right ? He flinched at what he heard. Thankfully she had her attention more drawn to her concoction than him. Lifting a piece of bacon into his mouth, he chewed while trying to think of something to shoot back with. "Maybe, maybe not. I'm in a shitty mood, alright? Look, I . He raised a hand over his face, washing the rest of the sleep away while wanting nothing more than the conversation to go anywhere else. "I apologize if I'm being rude. Let's just change the subject. Like for instance, what the heck do you have in that cup ? At last she moved to the table, reclaiming her seat and biting away at her food. "It's blood. Pig's blood to be specific. Izuku blinked, unsure he really heard that. Then he felt a grin crawl over him. Interest at last. "Well, you're just full of surprises. For your quirk, right ? She nodded, taking a sip in the process which stained her sharp teeth a ghoulish red. "Yep, and if you ask anything more about that then your ass is gone. Understand ? He chuckled, finding this to be highly amusing for what it was. Loud and clear. "Though let me ask this, you open your home to anyone with a sob story ? Again she downed some eggs with blood, eyeing him curiously. "No, and you seem to be taking this rather well. Most people get scared after I tell them that, and those that don't, let's just say they tend to be even more fucked in the head than me. He devoured another strip of pork product and pursed his lips, unsure if he was going too far. "Can I ask or ... Turns out when you have a blood quirk and most of the mental and sexual hang-ups that come with it, people with issues tend to flock around you a lot. I've learned it's better to keep insane people out than bring that trouble into your life for company. Trust me on that. And quat. Does that also include you since you pulled a knife on me last night? He thought to himself as he ate more of the breakfast. This was turning out better than he hoped. Whatever he hoped. Last night he guessed he just wanted something interesting to distract from his troubles, and he definitely got one. But there was so much more to ask. Hell, at this point he wouldn't mind knowing everything about this girl. If only because she was a novelty in his mundane, boring world. She was a person with actual stories which weren't the same I went to college, met my spouse and partied a bit type bullshit he heard every day since turning 18. Here was someone with life experience that went beyond just living by the script everyone else did. Oh, the things she could tell him. Hell, maybe he could make a book about her life and market it as some kind of moralistic self-help novel. Maybe they'd both get rich off it and help people at the same time. That was an idea, but the more he studied the bags under her eyes, the more he realized this woman probably wanted nothing to do with the spotlight of society. Still, he couldn't imagine living in a dump like this and being content. Though, he never did a stint in Tartarus, so she's likely to have gotten her fill of change and danger for one lifetime. Questions, questions and more questions. Which one to start with? Himiko wiped away the excess blood around her lips, licking her fangs with her tongue to clean them of the stain while she eyed him once again. It was critical and judgmental, looking upon him like he was a guilty child who was set to do more bad. So Greentop, do you have any other business today? And quat. Izuku noted the expression and cringed a little inside. He was a grown man. Who was she to regard him like that? Not of the official variety? Why? And quat. She took both of the now empty plates, setting them in the sink to soak while the tint of her mood remained. Because there's no sense in having you walk out that door if you're still not over whatever is in your head. It would be the death of me if I turned on the news and saw the headline "Dumbass Found Splattered Off the Kongu Bridge" and quat. Which is why we're spending today putting a plan together for you so you don't see that as the best option? Okay? And quat. He squinted at the girl who now firmly annoyed moved herself to the couch and pointed to a half-chewed recliner, expecting him to just comply. Again, why the fuck do you care? I'm just some random stranger to you. Hell, I could be a murderer for all you know. And quat. You're not a murderer, not even the shitty half-wits who don't put thought into it. You remind me a lot of myself before I turn things around, and maybe I want to do a little bit of good to make up for all the horrible shit I did. Is that so bad? And quat. He narrowed his own gaze at her, not exactly buying her reasoning. No, but you said it yourself, you aren't running a charity here, so what do you get out of it? And quat. She rolled her eyes at the man, tossing a throw pillow to the recliner to her right. Maybe I'm fucking lonely and you seem like the first decent person who I haven't scared off yet. Or maybe I want to get another favor from you. Or maybe I wanna. You get the damn point. Now shut up and sit down before I make you. And quat. He stood up from the table, his height and muscle adding to the heft of his bulk, making his host seem puny in comparison. He was beginning to get actually angry now. Not that he'd ever hurt a woman, of course. You think you can? I'd like to see you. And quat. There came a flash of something moving from her direction, and behind him came a loud thunk and flecks of drywall dust. Turning his head, he saw a pocket knife no larger than his palm embedded in the wall with pinpoint accuracy. Next came the flick of another blade as Himiko danced the weapon between her fingers with an ungodly ease. Care to see where this one goes next? Or do you want to listen to the person who brought you to safety? And quat. Reaching out to the drywall, Izuku pulled the knife from where it impacted. He felt the surprising weight of the thing, all metal construction with a smooth single edge that ended in a drop point tip. Still, it was cheaply made if the China label on the side was anything to go on. Turning back to the girl, he closed the knife after a few attempts and stuffed it inside his pocket. You know, I find it alarming how many times I need to point out that holding me at blade point is counterproductive to everything you're trying to do. And quat. It gets your attention though. Now sit before I get pissed. And quat. If this was not being pissed, he'd hate to see her when she's actually angry. Taking the best he could get at the moment, along with a small inkling of actual fear if he tried to run out the door, Izuku made himself comfortable on the poorly maintained recliner while his possibly homicide host continued to work the knife around her hand. She said nothing for a time, just watching him squirm under her digression. Then putting the tool away, she continued, leaning back into the sofa in the meantime. Alright, let's start off big and then go small. What's one thing you wanted to do for the longest time? It doesn't need to be realistic or moral, just speak your mind. And quat. He shrugged, crushing the throw pillow under his legs and musing on the question. I guess, be a hero, or maybe some kind of somebody, you know. I think the best way to put it is that for the longest time I wanted to be someone else since I'm lacking in what they have and I want to do good. If that makes sense. And quat. The girl clicked her tongue habitually, playing with a strand of hair to avoid eye contact. Believe me, I know exactly what you mean, and I also know trying to be somebody you're not, even if you admire or think you love them, will only end up killing you inside, even if you wear their skin for months on end. And quat. You mean that metaphorically, right? And quat. He asked with an uptick in his fear, hoping this wasn't about to become some Silence of the Lambs knockoff. Himiko shrugged, not really fazed by his reaction. Yes and no. Like I said, my quirk works off blood and I'll leave it at that. Anyway, you have some semblance of a goal, which is better than most people. Have you made any attempts to become licensed? The government can't deny you admission into the trials, since that would be genetic discrimination and end in a lawsuit. What about auditioning as a sidekick? That takes even less time and paperwork. All you need is the guy's approval and a stamp over your ID, and then you can at least manage paperwork. Or if you can't or don't want to go through all that, what about just doing it off the books? Have you tried any of that ? Inquat. Izuku shifted his view off to the side and chuckled nervously. Not really. I kinda gave up after UA rejected my admittance letter. Inquat. Yellow eyes stabbed into him harshly, observing all the parts about him that were flawed and visible at the moment, burning worse than if he had actually been stabbed. So you're a coward then ? Inquat. He sat up, ready to raise an argument. I am not a coward! Inquat. The blonde didn't move an inch, remaining relaxed and unbidden by him. You are right about that. You're a lazy coward. Anybody who wants something as bad as you claim to would work day and night to earn it. You just expected the position to fall into your lap without having to pay a price. Sorry to say, champ, but life doesn't work that way. You gotta suffer to get somewhere, and being a hero is one of the hardest paths to take, assuming you don't just pretend to be one for fame or some other bullshit. Inquat. He raised his voice a bit, starting to feel her get to a nerve he didn't know was there. All Might himself, Inquat, is nothing but a ruined old man. Yeah, he did good, nobody denies that, but he didn't determine how your life would be. All you're doing is blaming some dying corpse of a man who likely can't even eat anymore. Stop playing the victim and take some responsibility. There are thousands of street-level heroes who don't even have a combative quirk and they're dying for help. And hell, if you really wanted to be a part of the hero field, then you could have moved to the USA. They let anybody become a hero over there so long as they aren't insane and they get to use guns. That would even out your quirkless issue real fast. I mean, fucking Sugar Rush was putting ads in the paper because he needed help since his agency is overwhelmed by street stupidity. Inquat. She narrowed her eyes on his arms, noting how thin they were. Have you ever built any muscle? Done any martial arts? Gone to a first aid course? Anything that might make you slightly more marketable to people in that line of work? Inquat. If Izuku had the ability to either turn invisible or teleport away from this situation, he would in a heartbeat. And no, I just do a little cardio to pass the time between shifts. Inquat. You are totally pathetic, you know that? You have no criminal record, your body is in near perfect shape, you apparently have enough money to blow on vodka without a second thought, and despite this, you still wanted to give up. Not just on your dreams, but on fucking living. I don't have that, and you won't see me getting all resentful about it. Inquat. At once he shot up out of the chair like a rocket, slamming his feet on the cheaply carpeted floor and feeling part of his face go red. Well, what the fuck should I do about it then? Inquat. Like a viper, Himiko sat up, her arm whipping out around the air in a short semicircle that ended part way after his face. A near shattering slap echoed off the walls, bouncing around until total silence came. You stop complaining, you stop blaming others for your own misfortune regardless of it being their fault or not, and you stop wasting time with meaningless bullshit. Then, you start to get stronger mentally, physically and spiritually. Afterwards, you call up every Tom, Dick, Harry and Sally in a cape and ask for a job, even if it's just mopping floors. You prove yourself by acting like a hero should, making connections in the industry, and then maybe you get what you want. If that fails, then put on a mask and go punch a mugger in the teeth. It's your life, you go live it regardless of what happened in your past or what you think will happen in the future, because you are going to be dead one day. Inquat. She nodded a piece of his gray suit, tugging him close with a slight psychosis. Do you understand me? One day you'll be nothing but ash or worm food, and the only thing which will matter is how you spent your time on this earth. No more getting up ever again, and the only thing left in your eyes will be blankness as your very being is snuffed out. So stop being a pussy and do it before it's too late! Inquat. The first thing to register was the stinging pain that throbbed worse than his nearly forgotten headache. The second was her words, and the third was the urgency in her tone. Placing a hand over the clearly red spot on his skin, he asked again. Then how do I get there? Inquat. She said nothing once more, this time rising from her sofa and retreating into the only other room in the apartment. The sounds of rustling came loudly about the place until Himiko returned with 2 rods of polished hardwood in either hand. You train by putting your heart and soul into your actions and making your body driven by your soul and your soul driven by your heart. Inquat. And I'm to achieve this with 2 sticks? Inquat. She moved fast, too fast for his eyes to follow, and the next thing he felt was a tap under his Adam's apple. Cherry redwood threatened to block his windpipe if she so much as twitched her hand. Eskrima sticks, and yes for now. Inquat. Kneeling down, she rolled the wooden batons to her guest and took up a stance akin to a statue with her legs touching like she was standing at attention. Right now, I want you to try to hit me with them. It'll help out your endurance and your start to get used to moving explosively. Inquat. Izuku scooped up the pieces of wood. Keeping his host in sight, he loosely held them with no clue on how to properly use them. Despite the obvious danger of the woman, He still held up hands in surrender. Look, I'm down for whatever this is, but I'm not about to hit a lady. Much less one such as yourself after you let me into your home. And quad. An open palm slapped across his face, striking the same spot raw. Izuku yelped out of pain as much as surprise from how fast she was. Come on now, don't quit. This is the first step and tell you what, if you can touch me with one of those then we're done for today. And quad. You're not asking me to hit you as hard as I can, right? And quad. You should worry about yourself and let me worry about myself. Now hit me! And quad. Her words bounced around his head, keeping him from outright saying no and trying to leave. Well, he came here to experience new things and this was new. Plus she had made more than a few decent points, maybe she knew more than he did. Clenching his hands around the weapons, he raised one over his head and brought it down, only to hit empty air as Himiko sidestepped the attack effortlessly. Then he tried again, this time swinging both at the same time. It ended as the first attempt did. 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 10th, 20th, 50th. Each resulting in failure while Himiko taunted him like a child, making him soon rage at the repeated stifling of his adjective. There was little pattern or forethought to what he did, no skill or tactic, simply hit the target with a stick. Yet his humiliation would climax when the blonde stepped towards him as he moved to swing down. Using the momentum of his attack, Himiko stretched out a leg that he was too clumsy to avoid, tripping face first onto the carpet. As I've said before, you're pathetic. Just a stupid boy who wasted his dreams. And quad. She squatted with a smile that almost made him as uneasy as that wearing their skin comment. But you have potential, lots of it. And quad. A finger lightly poked him in the nose, bringing her close to his body. Quickly he wrapped a hand around her ankle, making sure to hold on tight as he dragged her to the ground. Himiko fell hard, yet for all his weight and strength advantage as he tried to get on top of her, he received a knee to the belly that both hurt and kept him partly off her. Thankfully he didn't need to pin her. One of his eskrima sticks touched her outstretched leg, ending the session at last. Though it ended in pain when she launched him back to the floor with both legs, making him groan when he slammed against the carpet again. She stared at him, amazed that he actually won, if even by her own fuck up. The smile grew as she got to her feet, offering him her hand in the process. Even more than I first thought. Not bad for your first time sparring. Alright, we're done for today. You can head home and we'll start tomorrow. Tonight, I want you to just test yourself physically. Push-ups, sit-ups, squats, that kind of thing. And quad. Izuku repressed a shudder of pain from his muscles already worn sore by this little bit. Standing was easier, yet there was also a hint of remorse at her telling him to leave. Hey, not to push it or anything, but you mind if I stick around a while longer? I got the day off so there isn't much for me to do. And quad. Her smile faded, reverting back into the tired visage of a woman aged far beyond her years. You might, but I don't. Gossip columns don't write themselves, and then I got to sort through pictures of celebrity dickheads and costume freaks in an hour. Besides, you do have something important to get done. Calling up this sugar rush guy for a job. And quad. He grimaced at how radically her expression changed. Meekly he pulled out his phone and tried to appear more confident than he was. Do you mind if we swap numbers? And quad. The former villainess found her own device buried somewhere in the couch cushions and laid it out on the dining table with the screen turned to her contacts. Do what you have to. Just hit me up after 8 p.m. and we'll plan out from there. Till then, get your ass in gear and start doing things, or you'll start seeing a lot more of me and you won't like that. Capiche? And quad. Yes ma And quad. He said with a mock salute that didn't lessen the scowl on her face. Once that was done and their numbers traded, Izuku found himself out of her door with a pair of wood clubs in a bag, a knife in his pocket, and a none too gentle reason to go down the path before him. Cringing at what happened in the last couple of hours as noon rolled around, Izuku decided that he may as well do it since there wasn't anything else he could see that may turn things around for the better. With a silent nod of thanks towards her apartment, he began to return home in order to prepare for what would come next. The tone was wrong, the pitch was off key, he sounded too nervous. Hello, I'm Izuku Midoriya and I ... And quad. No, it's wrong again. Too eager, sounds like begging. Damn it, why does this have to be so hard? Here he was standing in front of the bathroom mirror talking like he was going to be sent back to school when all that would happen at best was a phone call. Sadly there likely wasn't going to be anything coming from this, but at this point it was the most daring thing he did in the last 15 years. Besides the fact he had to at least show the crazy girl she was wrong about him. For a moment he thought about her, that strange woman who talked, and also threatened him, out of doing the ultimate fuck you to the world without hurting others. She wasn't like any woman he had met before. If that was a good thing or not he was unsure, but it was so interesting to just listen to her talk. He frowned the longer he considered how much more she had lived at a time when he was doing nothing but wasting away at work for years. Frankly, it made him angry with how better she was at dealing with life. However, he took one look at his apartment and noticed how large a difference in quality was between them. That didn't really help at all. Sighing, Izuku walked out of the bathroom and fished his mobile from his pocket. He stared at it apprehensively with ever fear of rejection and dismissal that had rooted deep since his childhood began to agitate, yet that was aided by another fear, one he never considered in his entire life. What if he actually got the job? That idea caused a shudder of cold coursing down his spine to nearly make him drop the phone. He wasn't qualified to be a hero, even if only being a sidekick to some E-list hero. Wait, he was quirkless, right? Of course, that meant he was going to fail anyway. Briefly he considered just forgetting the idea and going to blow more money on comics or booze or whatever while telling the girl he had done it. But if he did that, then he'd be proving her correct about him. A sick surge of fear shot him in the chest as he recalled the feral anger in her eyes when she put that knife to his neck, and that was her trying to be helpful. He could only guess at how bad she got when actually angry, especially after being lied to. Looking at the blank screen, Izuku grit his teeth. What else did he have to lose? After all, this was just another leap that would end predictably. Punching in the number, he took a deep breath and brought it to his ear. Dial tone ran on for a couple seconds before connecting the call to the other end. Sugar Man Hero Agency, how can I help you? ? The voice was husky and masculine with a deep striking tone that sounded like it wouldn't be out of place coming from a brick wall. Momentarily Izuku froze, amazed he even managed to make the attempt. Soon he regained some of that professional politeness which had been beaten into him for most of his existence. Yes, this Izuku Midoriya, and I'm calling in regards to your wanted ad for a potential sidekick opening. Rustling echoed through the speaker as whoever was talking readjusted themselves on what sounded like a chair. Will squeaked audibly on the other end along with it, making Izuku pull back a bit. Really? I didn't think anybody would actually call about that. You're serious? The quirkless office drone blinked, not quite able to process how casual the conversation was getting. This wasn't anything like what he'd been told all his life in regards to companies and business. Yes, I've been wanting to break into hero work for a while now, and your agency seemed like the proper fit. Then came a scrambling sound with squeaky desk drawers being opened and pens getting clicked. It scratched through the speaker as ink met parchment. Great, can you be here in 30 minutes for the interview? This was proceeding far too quickly for Izuku's tastes. There was none of the verbal subtlety that every job he applied for had. It was too alien for him to feel comfortable, but still he had to prove a point. It'll take me 45 to reach your office in time. Would you like to reschedule? More writing came through the line, increasing in quickness as the man answered. His gruff voice pierced the air smoothly in an amateurish sort of way. No, that's fine. Just please get here before the next hour if you can. The agency is located near the old sushi bar on 38th Street, by the way. Enter the alleyway and make a right and you can't miss it. It's the one with daisy yellow paint. After an exchange of final pleasantries, the call ended almost as soon as it started, and somehow it didn't end in utter failure on his part. Izuku lowered the phone, staring at it like the thing had spoken the secrets of the universe. It can't be this easy, it just can't. Shaking his head in disbelief, the salaryman double-checked his portfolio and was about to leave when his eye caught sight of an old bookshelf in the corner of the living room, one that was lined with his quirk notebooks. He cringed at the reaction those things always got him. It was so indifferent, so cruel. Yet he considered trying something new. Maybe this would help, or maybe it would just end his chances right there. As such, he turned around and stuffed his latest volume into his satchel along with his other credentials. The commute was thankfully mundane, with none of the semi-often robberies, hijackings, or other delays people with either too much time on their hands or not enough money cause. The train was cramped as he expected to the brim with other dead-eyed drones in suits, homeless who had everything around them, and even a pack of fresh-faced students who had yet to be crushed under society's demands. Izuku sat on the bench of the metro, watching the world roll by as a sea of infrastructure swallowed the metal worm he rode in. Most buildings appeared from on high to be pristine, more than some likely were, but collapsed ruins of skyscrapers also dotted the landscape, old reminders of the madness of not that long ago which the nation had neither the time nor the finances to remove. 20-odd minutes went by until the metro arrived at his station near the city of Nagasaki, the rank smell of urban life seeping in like a forgotten curse. Izuku didn't react, his senses having long gotten used to the smell as he shuffled onto the platform. It in of itself was grimy with the filth of a million souls, but he still blended into the mob, such in the way a cell collects around others to form an organism, never once paying too much mind to how easy he did it. Street preachers, hoodlums, victims and predators swarmed around him in the mass of bodies pushing every which way, all content on their own survival and pleasure without paying the green-haired man any mind. He was so ordinary that he may have not even looked that different, interchangeable as gears in a machine were men like him. After drifting purposefully through the squirming mass of society, Izuku stepped out by 38th Street, slinking into another avenue to disappear in until he passed an ramshackled sushi place like the man said, surrounded by various other buildings sprayed with tags and graffiti, and then turned a corner into a strangely maintained back alley at the edge of two larger shops which led to a squat, ugly square of a building that was painted a faded sunflower yellow. It was identical to any sort of storefront in the nation, with a wooden sign hanging from iron-barred window by the door reading Sugar Man Hero Agency in bright red. Scanning around himself first, Izuku unlocked his phone to double-check his map. Yep, this was the place. Not exactly what he pictured when heroic headquarters came to mind, but even then he was just here to make a point to that crazy blonde. He was just going to walk in, maybe take an interview and rub it in her face afterwards, nothing major. Sighing to himself, he moved to knock on the door when a speaker crackled to life, scaring the bejesus out of him in the process. "You Izuku Midoriya?" ? The quirkless man looked up at a globe camera focused on him from higher up the entrance and managed a soulless company smile. "Yes sir, I apologize that I'm late, but I'm here for an interview." Holding up his ID to the camera, he remained frozen in that twisted purgatory of holding in his mind, fully expecting to be turned away at any moment. "Alright, I'll buzz you in." An electronic buzz flared out from the door, detaching the locks holding the steel frame to the building as Izuku walked inside. The interior smelled like a mixture of a gym and a bakery, with the smell of sweat combining with the scent of cakes and candy that caused him to wrinkle his nose. The walls were likewise to the exterior, with a bright yellow filling the majority of the hallway leading further down the place. He unconsciously gripped the strap of his satchel as feelings of claustrophobia increased his anxiety. Then came the sounds of heavy footfalls from the path up ahead, seizing his heart in a vice as memories of how often he'd been jumped in school came back. His hand scrambled to the weight in his pocket, suddenly indescribably grateful that he brought the knife he took from that girl's place with him. Still, Izuku fought off most of the fear, suppressing it as he knew letting someone know you were afraid only made it worse. The noise stopped when at the other end of the hallway the bulkiest looking man Izuku had ever seen since middle school stood still, appraising the salaryman with a half-critical eye. He was a good foot taller than the green-haired quirkless, with enough muscle to make him look like a runner-up to Mr. Universe, and took up a good portion of the space with how wide his stance is. His hair was a spiked brown that jutted out in odd ways while his eye color matched his scalp. However, the most distinguishing feature of the man aside from his muscle mass was the set of obscenely thick lips that bordered near the uncanny valley. All this was covered by a sweat-stained pair of shorts and a gray t-shirt which grew even dirtier when the man scooped up a powdered donut from a bag in his left hand. The distance was closed quickly as a hand was whipped on those gym shorts and offered to the newcomer. There wasn't the expected aggression radiating off the man's very being. In fact, he seemed downright friendly with how he smiled. "Rikido Sato at your service. Though most just call me Ricky." Izuku took the outstretched hand, shaking it as politely as he could, his own smile being far more artificial than the Goliath before him. "Izuku Midoriya at yours." He couldn't help but be put off the strength in the stranger's grip, which brought about another stream of internal worry. Still, the quirkless drone kept his mask of a smile on like he was taught. "Now, I apologize if I've inconvenienced you in any way, but who exactly am I to report to for the interview?" Rikido jabbed a thick thumb into the center of his own chest with a humble pride shining inside him, the bag of sweets still dangling in the other hand. "That be me, Sugarman himself. Just follow me and we'll get started." Izuku held in his shock at seeing the person who was supposed to be employing him showing up like this, when they were a certified hero no less, and carried after the giant of a man to a desk inside another room lined with little trinkets and news articles detailing the higher points of the street-level crime fighter. The chair was basic and uncomfortable like every other one he was lorded over in, and the fact the room stank vaguely of sweat and burnt bread didn't help. Rikido set the bag of pastries off to the side of his desk and fished out a few documents that appeared from the offset to be the standard forms for government work that Izuku had seen before in his career of number tracking. "Sorry about the delay there, Chief. Been having a bit of a disorganization issue lately since it's just been me here to manage the stuff. Anyway, let's get this show going. Why exactly do you want to work as a hero?" Thankfully, the mask remained on, holding the polite, soulless smile in front of the inner panic Izuku was feeling. "Don't fuck this up. Don't fuck this up. Don't." He sighed internally at his angst. It wasn't like he'd actually be employed here, so why worry? The only reason he was talking to this mammoth was to prove that girl wrong, which he already had simply by showing up. As if moving in key with his mind, his posture slackened and his features drooped a bit to reveal the tired, burned out sensation he always had since meeting All Might. "To be honest, it's been a dream of mine since I was a kid. Saving people, making the world a better place, and ensuring everybody can forget their worries and smile if even just a little, but I ... He grimaced a bit at recalling what that crazy woman said about him. "I gave up before I could try and get into UA because I never thought I could amount to what a hero needs to be. Except now I'm 24 and realizing that I have to at least try to make my dreams happen, if not for myself, Then for those in need. And I thought since your agency is known for more street-level activity, it might be able to make use of a guy like me. And quad. The sugar hero's eyes had a certain gleam to them as he listened. It wasn't quite sympathetic, yet there was a strange sense of understanding that radiated off the crime fighter. We can only do the best we can, can't we? Anyway, that aside, do you have any experience in law enforcement? Done any tours of duty in the self-defense force? And quad. Izuku shrugged, his previous tenseness all but gone. Unfortunately no. I've just been a desk jockey since leaving school. And quad. Rikido nodded, picking up what appeared to be a quirk registry form with the green-haired man's face on it. He read the paper one more time before looking back at him. It says here you're quirkless. And quad. He raised an eyebrow at the question, a hint of anger finding its way to his voice. That's correct. Is there a problem? And quad. The hero shrugged in turn, not seething an apology or carrying an annoying sense of superiority when he answered. Legally speaking, no. You have the same right to apply to this position as anyone else. However, I'm going to be honest with you. This job will kill you if you aren't fit enough. There are people out there with quirks you couldn't believe, and I've almost died over 100 times in my career, and I've graduated UA and fought in the Paranormal Liberation War when I was still enrolled. It puts you in the crosshairs of some of the worst of humanity, and there are days where I wish I never put on my suit since my safety is permanently jeopardized because of my career and I'm just a local nobody. And quad. Izuku meditated on the response. He knew it was an extremely dangerous position that just came with the territory of dealing with chaos. But you still do it because it's the right thing to do, and you're the only one around that's able to deal with the problem. It doesn't make you the best, yet someone has to do it. And quad. Rikido pinched the bridge of his nose and sighed. I'm just trying to tell you the reality of the job, since too many people think it's like what they thought it was as kids, that's all. And quad. He inhaled, seeming to be somewhere else mentally for a little bit before shaking his head, something Izuku couldn't guess at. Anyway, what skills do you have aside from combat? Being in the hero industry isn't just punching bad guys in the face. A lot of it's paperwork, and more paperwork on top of having to try to calm down the public and maintain good relations with them and the government. That sounds like something you can be capable of? And quad. Izuku reached into his satchel and removed his credentials, handing them to who could be his potential employer, leaning back in the chair as he did so. I worked as an accountant for multiple companies in my time, along with dealing with some of the legal requirements of such transactions. Never been to court myself, but I know the ins and outs of tax work and document management. PR has never been a field I found myself in, but I assume you're not out there advertising for profit, so I could make it work if need be. And quad. To his surprise, when reviewing the credentials, Rikido's eyes practically bulged out of his head, only to then regain some kind of poker face with a cough to his hand as the documents were handed back. Well, someone with your qualifications certainly does seem to fit the bill of what I need. However, I'm going to have to see you in action before any decisions can be made. And quad. Again, Izuku raised an eyebrow at the man, then at the form laid out in front of him. If you can complete this form before the day's out, then there might be some serious consideration. And quad. The tone of the man's voice sounded meek and worried as he avoided making eye contact. Looking the paper over, Izuku found that it was a renewable warranty slip for a provincial government license, one that was a week away from expiring judging by the date. He gave Rikido an incredulous look that was met by gritted teeth and the sound of a man fed up with limitations. I didn't have the time to do the paperwork within the past couple of months because I needed to be out on patrol, and since it's only been me here thus far, I never really had the chance to complete it. And quad. Grabbing a pen off the desk, Izuku shook his head in mild annoyance as he went about filling in the form. And I'm assuming this is far from the only piece of paperwork you had gotten behind on? And quad. Shame colored the sweet's hero's voice as his eyes went to the floor. Unfortunately, it's rather difficult to manage all the finances and other bureaucratic stuff by myself, and I never really got a bump up in funding until recently due to a fairly good rate of arrests last year that got me into the 369th slot in the ranking. So hiring a sidekick has been out of reach for a while. Until now, of course. And quad. Izuku couldn't help but to laugh at that. It sounded so innocent compared to what he was used to hearing. He finished the form in a few minutes, since it was literally no different than any other governmental license out there in practicality, that it was just another piece of paper to fill out. Handing it back to the hero, he stood from his chair. Understandable, considering it's just been you here. But personally speaking, sir, you need to be more careful about that, because the government has a tendency to look very closely at these things. Is there anything else you need done before I go? And quad. A sense of anxiety visibly left the sugar hero as he scanned the document, having his shoulders drop from where they were. He put the pamphlet on the desk and grinned, his large lips making him appear strangely cartoonish when he gestured down the hallway. Have you ever hit a heavy bag? And quad. The rest of the day devolved into Izuku, a skinny, short, quirkless man learning how to throw a punch in his work suit, while a professional hero laughed at his efforts like a well-meaning teacher, throwing him tips and advice until he managed to land a direct jab on the leather. Yet that was the farthest from the strangest thing which occurred that day, something he honestly never thought would happen in all of his life. He got the job. Sure, there was still a 2-week waiting period for the background check to go through, but there was literally no chance he would fail that, and Rikito essentially asked when he would be able to start. This was a sure thing, and he simply got it by asking. When he got home that night, Izuku was still utterly shell-shocked. How did this happen? How did a Deku like him manage to get basically anything after life threw him to the side? Kachan, All Might, even his mother told him in no uncertain terms that his dream was stupid and pointless. They couldn't have been wrong, could they? He collapsed on his couch, still in his work clothes and unable to not stare ahead stupidly as he reviewed the events over and over again. He could have gotten in. He could have gotten in. In an instant he was on his feet, launching himself up from the sofa with a hot rage building inside him. God damn it. This whole fucking time he could have done it. He could be a hero in some fucking capacity, and instead he wasted years on a degree he didn't want in a field he loathed. What the hell was wrong with him? How many opportunities did he waste feeling sorry for himself? In the midst of his realization, Izuku was brought back to earth when a buzz came from his phone. He paused, allowing the fury to leave as he centered himself to answer the call. Looking at the screen and seeing the crazy girl's number, he forced himself to relax and slid the receive button as it came to his ear. Hello ? The voice on the other side was light and feminine as he remembered, sounding sweet despite the tone sounding aged beyond belief. So did you do what I suggested and go bother Candyman for a job ? His fingers tapped against the device as a flood of emotions swarmed him. Again he tried to bottle the feelings, but knew he would fail. Yes, I did, and I got the job . A quizzical tip entered her voice when she responded. You don't sound thrilled about it. Ain't this what you always wanted ? He slid a hand down his face to ease the bubbling feelings. Yeah, I'm happy about it even if it is only part-time for now. It's just, never mind. I proved you wrong, didn't I ? He felt the back of his spine jump from the iron in her voice, judging him harshly with those same narrowed eyes despite him not being able to physically see her. He knew in gut that was happening. Getting hired as a part-time babysitter for some E-list nobody doesn't prove shit. It's the first step out of 1,000 you gotta make, and it's only going to get harder from here. You need to radically change the way you think and live, which is going to be the hardest thing you've ever done. You're going to have to sacrifice a lot if you want to get ahead. That means getting rid of some of your comforts and vices in order to develop a discipline about yourself. You're going to need to burn away what's keeping you weak in order to grow, and I'm speaking from experience here when I say that's going to suck. The girl sighed a bit at her own tone before speaking in a far gentler tone that honestly made Izuku blush. That being said, the first step is always the hardest to make, so you've done really well today. Bravo, I'm proud of you. He swore his heart swelled at that despite the praise coming from some lunatic who had pulled knives on him. A compliment was a compliment after all. Thanks. No really, thank you for giving me the kick in the ass I needed to try. She laughed in a light giggle he found himself liking. Joy just oozing out of the sound before there came a lagging stop as a few more laughs continued until it stopped. Glad I could help, though if you really want to pay me back, come back to my place this Wednesday so I can train you some more. It's a hard road ahead of you and it helps me blow off some steam. He shrugged, figuring he could probably make time for that sort of thing since he wasn't in complete demand by his company. Sure, 6 p.m. work for you ? A happier shade filled her voice at that, completely at odds with the person he'd seen. More than you know, I'll be sure to go easy on you. Alright Izuku ? He flinched at the use of his first name, not used to anyone other than his mother calling him that. Sure. He hung up after what had to be one of the most uncomfortable conversations of his life thus far concluded, sure in the fact that at last this day would come to an end. Except there was one thing he noticed which mounted on his anxiety when he opened his satchel to empty it. His quirk notebook was gone. He must have left it at the Sugarman agency by mistake when he went to go train with that meathead. Damn it, why did it have to slip out from that chair end? No, this would not ruin his sleep. He had far larger priorities at hand and a real job to go to in the morning. Those came before anything, so Izuku merely buried the sensation with the rest of his repressed parts and readied for bed, hoping against hope that he'd finally get something good to happen to him for once. She hated the smell of concrete, loathed it with a passion as everyone who had been on the inside of a cell had. Yet she couldn't move at all inside the box they put her in, her limbs trapped tight by leather strips as she saw nothing but the blinding light of fluorescent bulbs and heard only the sound of her organs since she had long ago learned not to scream lest they come and sedate her. This was hell, and she knew without a doubt she deserved every second of it. So much blood, so many delightful smells and screaming as she drank her fill. They didn't love her, she knew that too well. That's why she took and cut and stabbed, to just gain a meager sliver of their lives that were so much better than her own. Yet even now in the bed, unable to even scratch her nose, she still could feel it, see it, even after years of it having passed. She could still feel her only real friend disappear in her arms as he saved her life. She could still. Her body sprang up with a jolt when a ringtone erupted from her nightstand. The room was dark and chilly from the winter air in the thin walls of her cheap apartment. Sweat covered every inch of her as she found herself struggling to catch her breath. A dream? It was just a dream. She wasn't in that place anymore. She got out and she'd never go back again. She turned her head to the right, remembering the call and hurried to answer, knowing full well who would contact her at such an ungodly hour. Hello ? Inquat. Soft, sweet words filtered through the speaker that summoned up memories of her youth when she remembered the most enjoyable time of her life and the hijinks she used to play on this girl. Hey Himiko, I'm just calling to check up on you. Everything alright ? Inquat. She smiled meaningfully at the sentiment despite her being essentially her parole officer and sponsor. The anti-gravity heroine felt like the closest thing she had to a positive human relationship in the sad shell of her life. Yeah, I'm doing fine, cheeky. I'm getting to my therapy sessions on time. I'm taking my pills and I'm not nicking myself like I used to. What about you ? Inquat. Uraka was silent for an uncomfortable amount of time before she spoke with a heavy hesitation in her voice. Himiko, the reason I called was because your therapist contacted me saying you've been having urges again. Inquat. The blonde rolled her eyes as she moved off her bed and toward the kitchen, her bare skin exposed to the cold night air while she walked. Unfortunately I know, but I can't lie about those things. If I do and one of those truth tellers finds out, it'll violate my parole. Inquat. The sound of oxygen being sucked through teeth came from the speaker as the brunette responded. I know, but, given your past history, I just worry about you. Inquat. Toga paused as she fished a country from the fridge, deciding to get a head start on the before the deadline starts. Are you calling us back to your old friend? Look, you've done so much for yourself, I just don't want to see you drowned out. If you need to talk about it, it isn't anything more than cheese. I'm just fucking wondering why somebody's making all this food. I just have messed up kinks. That's it. Inquat. So this isn't you getting thirsty again like when we were teens? Inquat. The tab of the drink cracked open, exposing the green liquid to the air as the former slasher sat on her couch. Not in the slightest. Believe me, I'd let you know if I was feeling that bad. A cup or two of cow's blood keeps me sane along with those pills the quacks keep giving me. Inquat. An audible sigh of relief filled the room as Uraka decompressed. Well, that's good to know. Anything else you need to talk about? Inquat. She shrugged, taking a sip of the drink. Nothing much, same old shit, although I kinda wanna ask a favor. Inquat. Curiosity structured every bit of the response. Oh, and what might that be? Inquat. She paused, considering the best way to phrase the question. You know Sugarman, right? Could you maybe let me know if he's gotten a new sidekick recently? Inquat. A repressed fierceness rested in the heroine's words, surely seeing her now as a villain again like she did on occasion if things got bad enough. Why do you need to know that? Inquat. She was too tired to really give a shit about how the girl felt. It isn't what you think. I met some loser on a bridge who was about to off himself because he was pissy at life, and we had a talk that eventually led to me suggesting he join the big guy's agency since he's practically quirkless himself, and he told me he got the job and I just want to make sure he isn't bullshitting me. Inquat. Now came a tone she was at times grateful and annoyed at. It was the older sister tone of voice the brunette was often to take in regards to her. A guy? Wait, you talked him off of jumping off a bridge. When was this? Inquat. Against her better judgment, she threw her hand up in the air to perhaps exercise some of the annoyance out of her. 2 days ago. He's this geeky dumbass who gave up on his dreams since he was born quirkless, and I got pissed off at him and decided to do something about it since. Inquat. She felt herself choke a bit at the sudden memory. Since Jin would have done the same. Inquat. The emotional pain was momentary, having lost much of its sharper potency due to the passage of time. Still, it hurts to see the masked face of one of the few, if only people who genuinely accepted her and her issues fade away right before her eyes. Silence followed afterwards. The heroine used to the second or two the simple name could take from her self-carried charge. Best to just carry on the conversation to prevent a full-on breakdown. He isn't like those other creeps you met before, right? I really don't want to have to contact the Public Safety Commission again because some psycho wants you to cut his junk off like last time. Inquat. Himiko shivered in disgust at the reference. Her dating life was nearly as catastrophic as the rest of what was left of her situation. Only thanks to time and venturing in the niches of niche dating sites, she soon discovered people even more depraved and sick than she ever was in her teens. That one in particular was one of the more mild examples of the twisted souls she made the mistake of inviting to her life. Thankfully no, he's the plainest guy around from what I can see. Inquat. Uraka clearly wasn't convinced about the idea, but she still humored the girl. Assuming you aren't being played like those few times, what's this guy's name? Inquat. The blonde shrugged to herself, taking another swig from the can. Izuku Midoriya. He's about 5'9" in height, probably 155 in weight, green hair, green eyes, a few freckles around his face, and likely has the look of someone with a stick up their ass. Inquat. A raised eyebrow came over the line, typified in the brunette's voice to the 10th degree. You sound like you took quite a bit of attention over memorizing this dude. He's your new boyfriend or something ? Inquat. The blonde scoffed at the idea. He's just some schmuck I'm helping to make amends. Yeah, he's cute, in a not bloody way, but other than that he's a complete loser who just screams mommy's boy. Best I can tell, he's employed, but there's nothing else going on for him. Inquat. The eyebrow remained raised. So you mean to tell me you wouldn't drop your pants if this guy gave you his blood ? Inquat. Indignation was ripe in the former villainous tone, her long, tangled hair furiously starting to go this way and that. How many times do I have to tell you? I haven't fucked anybody yet. All those other relationships, if you can even call them that, never got there since I kept getting weirdos who creeped me out before that could happen ! Inquat. Condescension shot back from the heroine now. Hey, I'm only repeating what you keep fantasizing about. It ain't easy reviewing the smut you have to write for therapy, though to your credit, it's way better than the stuff you cranked out before you went clean. How did it go again? I strap him down to the bed as I drink from the shallow cut on his arm, hearing him moan and howl in ecstasy while my hand caresses his manhood. All the while he's begging to give me more of his sanguine, struggling to touch my skin with those adoring, worshipping eyes drilling into my soul as black and tainted may it be. Inquat. That sounds about right ? Inquat. A blush filtered Himiko's cheeks, turning her pale skin partially red with embarrassment. Well, I'll forget about it. He's just some loser for right now that I'm working on because I don't have anything better to do and that's it. Inquat. An eye roll had happened. She knew it in her heart when Uraka continued with that bitchy filter she could hold just as well as that angelic, sisterly side. Sure Miko, sure. Just let me know if this guy asks to have you carve out his spine like that other fella did a few years ago. Anyway, you need any stupid information ? Inquat. Finishing the drink, she crushed the can, throwing it to the floor as she moved to her laptop and opened her editor's workshop, careful to keep the phone to her ear. Always. People lap up the dumb shit celebrities get up to. Latest bit I got was some male Idol member getting caught with the backup singer's dick in his mouth backstage. That and Lady Mushroom heading on a date with her sidekick, who happens to be 5 years younger than her. Aside from those, it's the usual BS. Mind if I ask anything about Dynamite? Everybody's chomping at the bit to figure out what he's been up to since he partially vanished from the public sector. Most anyone can tell is that he shows up to take on a bad guy if it's bad enough and vanishes. Inquat. Any hint of relaxation or familiarity vanished from the anti-gravity user, yet there was none of the suspicion that would usually come after such a question. Only a deep, unspoken discomfort and pity that Himiko hadn't heard even at her worst colored Uraka's response, digging the interest more than it should have been. He's fine. Katsuki is handling things in his own way and doing what he needs to do in order to help people. Inquat. It was now Himiko's turn to raise an eyebrow. Okay, I know shit was rough once you guys broke up, but I thought he'd at least keep in contact with you or somebody at least. Inquat. Pain lingered in the answer, one that gave no pleasure to the sadist. He does, we talk every so often, but he always brings up this Deku person and nobody has any idea who that is. Inquat. Himiko paused in her typing, feeling a hook get drawn in her brain. He's still on about that ? Inquat. A tired, worried sound came in the girl's response, made worse by years of watching a friend so full of life get hurt. Yes, and the most any of us can make out is that it's a childhood friend of his. Inquat. A laugh came from the blonde at the mental picture of anyone actually willingly being that asshole's friend aside from doing it to get connections or a leg up in the industry. Maybe if I find this guy and interview him, I'll get awarded a Pulitzer for finally cracking the secret. Inquat. Another pause came as the sound of plastic bending snuck in through the speaker. I doubt it. I'm going to sign off for the night. Miko, don't forget you have that meeting with me in 2 weeks. Inquat. Himiko waved a hand at the statement as her brain began to slink fully into her task. Yeah, I remember cheeky. Don't get drunk, don't smoke in the office, take my daily blood and make sure to test the amount of ST13 protein in my system so I don't go nuts. Same shit we've done since high school. Inquat. The hero said nothing and cut the call off, leaving the survivor to her task. Yet all the while the blood drinker couldn't help but wonder about that name, Deku. Inquat. She had heard the man who became #1 scream it like a battle cry only 2 times before in their professional relations, both filled with emotion and fire like one summoning some divine power or marker of courage or justice. Once in the raid on the bar when he was foolish enough to blast all for one himself in the face before fleeing, and the other was right before the bastard killed Tomura by combusting his head into a fine red paste after the AFO quirk left him. Musing on the implications, Himiko Toga couldn't help but to smile at the thought of finding this Deku person. Not to torture or maim them like her younger self would have for the sake of avenging her fallen leader, but to have them spill every little secret about the golden man, which exposed that sham and laugh as the money flowed to her, while the man who took everything from the only family she had burned under the public court of fame. Maybe she'd even share the money with this Deku person. Because after all, with a horrible person like Katsuki Bakugo, there had to be every reason for this person to get even.